Welcome back. It is Saturday morning, and we're back for another edition of the Saturday Morning Show here on Dickson County Radio. And as has been our sort of theme throughout the year, every Saturday morning that we've done the show, that we weren't on vacation, we have had in a political candidate because 2026 has been such a big year for elections. I mean, we have so many offices that are up for election. We got a lot of contested races, and so we've just been trying to bring the candidates in and let you guys talk to them. And I think we're around episode number 19, I think, this year. And we're going a little higher up on the chain this week. We've got actual congressional candidate here with us today. I'm really excited about this. Joshua Warren Sales. He's a Democratic candidate for Congressional District 7, which does include all of Dickson County. So he's here to talk to his voters today. We appreciate you coming in. How you doing today, Joshua?
I'm doing great. It's been a great day. Early voting started yesterday. It's your typical Saturday. I've got some house chores to do after this. But otherwise, I'm just enjoying the smooth weather we've been having the past couple days.
Yeah, smooth is one way to put it. It's been very wet out there, hasn't it? It's almost like swimming through the air.
But at the same time, I haven't had to water the garden. So that's I'll take that.
Well, man, I really appreciate you coming in today. Talk about your campaign. We are, like you said, already pretty much in the middle of early voting here or the beginning of it. And so, taking a few minutes away to come talk to us is awesome. And I want to encourage everybody to go out and vote today if you can. It's the public library is open here in Dickson, and then out in Charlotte, you've got an opportunity there as well. And at the end of the show, we'll go over the times and everything. But it's that time of the year. It's time to cast your vote. Well, I want to start off the show by giving you a chance to talk about yourself a little bit. I know sometimes that makes people feel uncomfortable, but it's really helpful to our listeners who maybe don't know who you are and are trying to sort of connect the name, with some details about your campaign. So if you don't mind, and you can take it back as far as you want, to day one, or if you want to go a little more recent, but just tell us a little bit about who Joshua Warren Sales is.
Yeah, so I was born and raised in a small farming town in Northern California. My father was a cop. My mother was a paraprofessional helping with special needs children in the local school system. I am a twin brother. Jacob and I are the youngest of 5. 2 older sisters and an older half brother on the mother's side. So it was a very crowded household. We grew up with parents who constantly worked overtime, right? My father would take on the graveyard shifts for the extra pay. My mother would take on, in California, there's a really cool program called the Respite Program. And what it does is essentially say, we understand that parents with children with special needs have difficulty finding babysitters. And so what the California state government does is say, we will validate who's coming in, people like my mother who was already working within the system, and say we will pay them to come in and help you. And based off of the disability of your child, you got so many hours per month. Whether you wanted to use that literally just be like, hey, I can now go to the grocery store without having to worry about my kid, or, whether you wanted to use it as a date night to finally go out and have that moment with your spouse that, allows you as a family to keep going. But so it meant for a lot of my life that it wasn't that my parents were absent because they didn't want to be there. It was they were absent because they wanted to give us the best that they could. And so very early on, I think I was, manning the grill at 8 years old, doing my own laundry by 10, very much became a very independent person and one who understood, life isn't always going to hand you everything. You do have to work for things. Out of high school, I joined the U.S. Army. It was something that for years I had wanted to do. I remember even talking to my high school counselor about, hey, yeah, don't bother talking to me about any colleges. Like, I'm going into the Army. Like, that is what I want to do. I actually had got my first military contract with the Navy to do nuclear engineering. and I tore my ACL on the first football game of my senior year. It was a after the whistle tackle, illegal tackle, that the other player put his shoulder right into the back of my knee. I mean, it was one of those ones where like the bleachers cleared out and like almost became a huge thing. And so the Navy kind of tore up my contract and said, well, maybe come back later. I redid my ASVAB, got a 98 on it, and literally went to all the other recruiters and said, hey, what would you give me? Ended up with the Army, 89 Delta EOD bomb defusal, and was with the Army for about a year when I tore my ACL a second time. Oh, wow. And the Army said, okay, maybe it's better if we go our separate ways. I didn't blame them for that. I understood why. And it wasn't anything of like me personally not wanting to be there. It was a thing of like literally my body just wasn't allowing it. And at the time I was stationed at Redstone Arsenal, just outside of Huntsville, Alabama. Most people here in Dixon are familiar with it. I was at the time dating a young lady who lived up in Knoxville, Tennessee. And so I went up to Knoxville and I fell in love with the scruffy city, right? On the footsteps of the Appalachia, on the fact of UT football, the fact that I'm an English major, and my favorite author, Cormac McCarthy, actually lived and wrote most of his early books about Knoxville. And so had every reason to stay. And I like to tell people that, as a kid, you never get to choose where you live. In the military, you never get to choose where you live. When I was an adult who had the capability of choosing where to live, I chose Tennessee. And I've stayed here ever since. And I've stayed because the people I started meeting weren't unfamiliar to me. Quite the opposite. They were very familiar to me. These were people that I was like, this could have been my best friend in high school. And I quickly started realizing that a lot of the stuff we hear in the media that pits one region against another isn't always correct. So I was in Knoxville. I started waiting tables. I went to the local community college. I got my associate's degree in video production. I worked my way up to restaurant management as I was doing that. I worked in a couple independent family films. Little Ponderosa Zoo. If you've ever, this is probably one person in all of Dixon County, but if you have that DVD, put it on, and I promise you, you will see me in it. At UT, ended up going to UT, got enrolled there for my English degree. I met my wife. We started dating. We've been together now for, we're going on 11 years together. September will be 4 years married, 11 years since date night number one. She was originally from the Middle Tennessee area, grew up in Williamson County, and 2021 rolls around, she gets a job at Vanderbilt doing medical research. So this was kind of a homecoming for her. One, we were just grateful. 2021, this is still pandemic, lots of people out of jobs, finding a job really difficult. So she was really happy to find a job that was doing what she had a degree in, offered benefits, all of that. We moved to Bellevue and spent about a year and a half there before we decided, hey, let's go ahead and tap into that VA home loan and buy some property. Rebecca, my wife, has a horse, Mary, and now we have a donkey, Reba. And we wanted property where, we were like, we're paying hundreds of dollars a month, 500 actually, to have this horse on someone else's property. Let's get something of our own. And so we did. We moved to South Cheatham County. We got just over 2 acres of land, which is just perfect for 2 equines. We have a small little garden with it and loving it. I mean, it's the ability to, on a Friday afternoon, sit on the back porch and like overlook just the sun setting on, you know, the woods behind the house and have a cold one and just relax like that. I'm living the American dream in so many ways. In 2020, my mother passed away. It was kind of unexpected, and just like with most people, when something like that happens, it really sends you on this journey of like searching your own life and like what you're doing with it. And that's kind of when I realized I was no longer happy managing restaurants. Like, nothing against, like, I love local restaurants. I love mom and pop places. That's my bread and butter. But for myself, I was like, I feel like I could do something else. I feel like I could do something that would fulfill me more. And I made a phone call to a place called Nashville Teacher Residency, literally just to be like, hey, so I have my bachelor's. How do I go from that to being a teacher? And they were like, well, literally you just have to like take our program and get licensed. We're actually interviewing candidates right now. Do you want to do a phone interview? And I was like, sure. By the end of the phone interview, they were like, hey, you got a spot if you want it. So I made a transition in my life. I went from managing restaurants to being an English teacher. And today I am a English teacher in Davidson County. I teach 11th grade English, both English 3 as well as AP English language, the study of rhetoric, which is why, you know, I joke with a lot of people when they're like, well, your speeches are so well done. And I'm like, thank you. I teach it. Like that's my job. Yes. I hope I'm good at it. But so then, right, the question becomes, how did I go from that to running for U.S. Congress? And part of it begins March of last year. I received a letter in the mail from Cheatham County Democrats saying, hey, we are having a monthly meeting. We would love for you to come out. It wasn't personal to me. It was sent out to like a bunch of people. Basically anyone who had in the prior year like voted on the Democratic primary received one of those in Cheatham County. And so I looked at my wife and I was like, hey, I think we're in a place where like we can start to like get more involved in our community. Like our lives are settling in now. We've got the house, we've got good stable jobs. Like we can start getting involved in the community and giving back. And so we jumped in the car and we drove out to it. We get there and maybe we misread the letter because this was their reorganizing meeting where they literally are voting on like, okay, who's going to be the representative for this part of Cheatham County? Who's going to be the representative for that? And next thing I know, like these people are like, well, you're young and you're new. How about you go ahead and represent Pegram? And I'm just like, okay, sure. So by the end of it, we were voted on as executive members for the Cheatham County Democratic Party. The meeting's over and we're looking out the window and nothing but storm clouds. And this is where, you know, as married men, I'm going to say something that is going to resonate with you very quickly. And any married man on this probably knows what I'm about to say. I should have listened to my wife. Because Rebecca goes, well, maybe we should, you know, wait this out. Like they're saying on the news that like this could be a very bad storm. Like maybe we should just wait it out. And I'm like, nah, it's like a 25-minute drive. Like we can just race home really quick. We'll be fine. So we jump in the car and we start driving and we are on the bridge over the Cumberland when it starts hailing. We get onto River Road when the wind is so strong, it's blowing the car back and forth. I mean, to the point that we pull over at one point and we're like, okay, let's see if it can die down a little bit. And it does. So we start driving the rest of the way home. We're on Sam's Creek Road. And we're on the downside of the hill, not before you get to the waste management center there. And the storm starts picking up again. And it's raining so hard you can barely see the car in front of you. And all I see is red lights. They've stopped. And so I stop. And I can't really see that much ahead of them, but I can barely make out in front of them. The car has stopped, and the car in front of that has stopped. And we sit there for a couple minutes, and my wife is pulling up on her phone, Nash Severe, and going like, well, they're talking about like there's rotation in the storm right now just north of Kingston Springs. And I'm like, that is exactly where we are. It's just north of Kingston Springs. And so I jump out of the car to see what's going on. A oak tree had come down across Sam's Creek, and some other people have jumped out of their cars as well. And we literally just start with bare hands, just breaking apart like limbs. Some guys have like hatchets, a couple had like some saws. We're going at this as fast as we can to break this down, because every single one of us understood until this is gone, none of us are getting home. Thankfully, like a couple minutes later, someone shows up with a chainsaw.
Nice.
You know, good old country boys.
Probably Bubba.
Yeah, probably Bubba, exactly. All my Kingston Springs people know exactly who we're talking about.
Yes. Yeah, if you're from Kingston Springs, this is an inside joke, I guess, but there is actually a Bubba.
There is. He's great. He's amazing.
Awesome.
Kingston Springs wouldn't be the
man.
town that it is without him. And I mean, we get this entire tree cleared. Like, I was laughing so hard because literally watching like the fire department pulling up, like as we're throwing off like the last like piece of the log, and we're like, guys, you can turn around, like it's done. We cleared it. We get in the car, we drive the rest of the way home, and you know, my neighbors were showing me the next day like video footage from like their ring cams just a block away from where we were. Literally, you know, there was no reported actual tornado that day in Kingston Springs, but they said it got close. And some of these ring cam footages were, you know, literally watching sheds like moving and lawn furniture being blown clear across the lawns and the streets. That I was like, yeah, it's probably good we got home when we did. But the thing that kept going through my head was the fact that during that moment, right, I had just got done being elected an executive member of the Democratic Party. Not a single person was stopping and saying, well, are you a Republican or a Democrat?
Right.
Who did you vote for? What's your stance on this? In that moment, all of us were just neighbors who understood that as a community, we had to come together and do something. Not for any one of us, but for all of us. And so, flash forward to February of this year. Not a single Democrat had pulled the ticket to run for Congress. And I'm looking at this like, one, democracy dies when nobody runs, right?
Yeah.
If only one person is running, regardless of party, that is not a healthy democracy. And two, frankly put, I didn't like how Matt Van Epps was representing us in Congress. Matt Van Epps, literally in February of this year, voted to allow what's called junk insurance plans. These are the type of health insurance plans that you get because you're like, oh, it's a very cheap premium and I can actually afford this one, until you get diagnosed with something and your doctor goes, well, your insurance doesn't cover this. And so it's meaningless to have that health insurance. Matt Van Epps voted in January on House Joint Resolution 140, which was opening up and I'm blanking on the name of this. Sorry, there's so much in my head. It opened up federal land in Minnesota to a Chilean billionaire mining company. For this Chilean company to come in and extract precious resources out of Minnesota, despite the fact that every ecological report that came out said this is going to poison the local groundwater. And to me, it became a thing of, this isn't about left or right. This is about what is best for my neighbors. And I didn't see that happening with Matt Van Epps. And so with nobody else standing up to do it, I stood up. Now, since then, right, in March of this year, the Tennessee state legislature did the redistricting. And, excuse me, that was May of this year. My apologies. But they did their redistricting, and at that time, they allowed others to jump into the race. One thing I like to build the context of is Tennessee 7, the 14 counties that it used to be, was considered an R+22 on the Cook political rating, meaning that any Republican should win by 22 points. It shifted when it was redistricted and we lost 6 counties and we picked up Macon, Trousdale, and most of Sumner County. It shifted to an R+11, meaning that this was becoming, in theory, an easier race for Democrats to actually challenge. And that's when you had Darden Copeland, Vincent Dixie, Soletta Holloway all say, I'm game now. And so I chose to stay in the race because I had a window where I could have dropped out, where I could have said, okay, cool, these other people are in, they can pick up the slack. But I chose to stay in because the things that I'm running on, I didn't see any of them running on. And we'll get into that in a moment, right? Like the details of what I'm running on and why I'm running. But the fact is that my goal has always been, and I've said this from day one, from my very first interview with the Kingston Springs Gazette, I'm not here to pit the left against the right. If I did that, I'd always be in a fight with my twin brother because he votes on the other side that I do, right? I'm not afraid to talk to a Republican because if I was, I would never talk to my father. But when we stop having these conversations, when we stop having civil discourse, we're in a lot of trouble, right? It is what it is, social media being social media. But, I had just the other day where I was approved by the Moms Demand Action, which is they call themselves a common sense gun reform group, right? They had approved me as a candidate. That's not an endorsement. That's them saying, hey, we've talked with Mr. Sales. We understand his position on guns. And I say this as a gun owner. They go, we gave him this award, naming him as a candidate that we approve and that people can look at and just know that we've approved him. And instantly this guy gets on there and he's like, well, you saying that you're for common gun sense reform is you letting illegal immigrants in. And I'm like, what? I'm like, guy, and this comment is still up there because he started it by calling me a low T male. And I was like, if you want to have an actual conversation, a respectful conversation, I'm always happy to have one. But if you are not going to be respectful, I do not have to have this conversation with you. I am not beholden to sitting here and conversing with you if all you're going to do is harass me.
Nobody wants to be insulted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And his response was, just, well, I'm going to be adult about this and call you whatever I want to call you. And I was like, I didn't even respond to that. I'm like, you know what? I said I wasn't going to talk to you. I'm not going to talk to you.
Sometimes you just got to walk away.
Exactly. But that is something that I want to see more of. Not the insults, but having civil conversations.
Yes.
Because when I have sat down with people, I was in Greenbrier, Tennessee for their Rumble in the Briar, their car show earlier in the year. A gentleman with a MAGA hat came came up to me and we started talking, and I talked to him about one of the bills I'm going to talk about in a moment. And by the end of it, he was like, I could vote for you. And I was like, thank you. I would love to earn your vote. I was in Trousdale County and I won't name her or her position, but a member of the Trousdale Republican Party literally said, I am voting for you over Matt Van Epps because you are explaining to me how you're actually going to put Americans first, not these multinational companies. And to me, that's not a thing of Republican versus Democrat. Like, I'm running as a Democrat. Literally, I'm running as a Democrat because as a party member, I have to. I literally cannot not run as a Democrat. Otherwise, I would have to step out of the party leadership that I'm in. Mm-hmm. So I'm running as a Democrat, but I'm running as a Democrat that's running on these issues that I think a lot of us can actually agree on.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why I appreciate you coming in to talk to me on this show. And that's sort of always been the goal of this show is, yeah, you may think you know somebody, but have you heard them come into the studio here and sit down with us and talk for 30 minutes to an hour, whatever the case may be, and really hear what they really believe? Because not every Republican is the same. Not every Democrat is the same, right? Let's go ahead, take a quick break, come back. I want to ask you about these bills that you've sort of mentioned. Mm-hmm. Because I'm interested now. You've kind of you got me on the hook. You've seen some people that really liked them. I want to hear about them too. So appreciate you coming in today. This is Joshua Warren Sales running as a Democratic candidate in the Congressional District 7 race. Now you're running on the Democrat side, which is competitive.
Yes.
So you're looking for some votes here, and we'll give you the chance to lay out your key points of your campaign and some of these bills when we come back. You're listening to the Saturday Morning Show right here on Dickson County Radio. Stay with us. We'll be 3, 2, 1. All right, we are back here on the Saturday Morning Show. Joshua Warren Sales is our guest this morning. He's running as a Democrat candidate in the Congressional District 7, which they did just redraw the districts, but I'll kind of give you guys a little information to maybe help you out here. Matt Van Epps, he's the current sitting. We had a special election over District 7. It's been, in the news quite a bit here lately. And I think Matt Van Epps is running unopposed, but the Democrat side, it is a competitive race. He's got a couple of competitors here, and so he's trying to get the word out about his campaign, and we appreciate you coming in here and talking to us here on Dickson County Radio. We absolutely love it, and having a great conversation with you. You and I have some things in common. We're both teachers, and so that's I always love talking to another teacher. Like I said in the break, I don't have to drag stuff out of you. You just like to talk, man. I love it. Now, you did sort of mention to us why you decided to run, and I found that to be a very interesting story with the storm and everything. Now, once you decide to run, I guess you've got to figure out what you're going to do if you get in there. You got to have some key points of your campaign. You got to have things to campaign on. You mentioned a couple of bills that you've sort of drawn up, and I'd love for you to take some time now and explain to us kind of what some of these key points of your campaign are and what you're going to do if you win.
Yeah, so I'll start by saying that you can find all of these on my website, salesforcongress.com. That is SALES. The number 4 congress.com. And y'all, if you mess up and you type out FOR, I was smart enough to buy both domains. They both go to the same place.
Smart man.
And I'm not going to go over all of them because I'm running on 12 bills in total. And it was actually hard for me to run it down to just 12 because there's so much going on in our world right now that affects every part of our life, right? So I'm just going to touch on a few key ones and ones that I think need to be talked about because in some ways, some of these are going to seem very common sense. There's one or two that might seem controversial, but when we talk about them and we actually understand the makeup of them, the benefits of them are ones that a lot of people don't understand. So the first one I'm going to talk about is the Mustard Seed Act. Right? In the Bible, we are told with faith as small as a mustard seed, you can move mountains. And I named this bill the Mustard Seed Act because there's a small piece of your paycheck taken out every single year that is meant to be the moving of the mountain when you retire and guaranteeing that you can live a comfortable life after you have put in 50 plus years of hard work as an American worker. Social Security. Right now, Social Security has been declared to have a life expectancy of 6 years. This isn't some random online conspiracy. This is literally from our Department of Treasury. They have named that in 6 years, Social Security will be insolvent. What that means is that Social Security will only be able to pay out what it takes in. And they're predicting that in 6 years, that's going to equate to you only receiving 78% of what you are actually owed. I think about someone like my father, who is on Social Security. It's his only form of income. A 22% cut in his income will devastate him. This is a man who's already getting his groceries from Walmart rather than some nicer grocery store. This is already a man who has canceled his cable and who literally lets the AC run up to 90 degrees in the house before he turns it on. This is a man who's worked his entire life, who was a police officer, who worked security for the local Air Force base, and has paid his whole life into this program, who is being told, because your government has mismanaged this system, you're going to suffer for it. And it's not just my father. It is every single American. And so I started looking into what caused this. Like, is it, something, is there a hole in the bottom of the pool that we need to plug? What's the issue here? And, the first thing that most people point to, and they're right to point to it, is the fact that Congress has repeatedly over the years taken out of Social Security. They borrowed out of it and said, we'll repay it at some point. That needs to stop. That is a program that every American is involved in. And we don't get to say whether Congress dips their hands into it or not. But as your congressperson, one of the first things I'm going to say is we are passing a law that says we never do this again. Because us doing that has only led to this problem. The second thing I found out was not all income is equal income. And this was actually devastating to me. This was something that when I've explained it to people, they go, I didn't know this. And that doesn't seem fair. There's two things going on here. The first is what's called the Social Security income cap. This changes every year based off of inflation, but currently for 2026, it is set at $184,500. Meaning if you make $184,501, that $1 isn't taxed for Social Security. So the rest of us as teachers, from January 1st to December 31st, we pay 6.2% of our income in Social Security. An individual making $1 million stops paying into Social Security on March 9th. A billionaire stops paying into Social Security January 2nd. Wow. And to me, that's a problem, right? That is saying some of you will pay this, some of you will not. And it gets worse. If you make your money through capital gains, which is primarily how billionaires make all of their money, none of that is ever taxed for Social Security. So again, we pay 6.2% on every dollar we make as working class Americans, as the 90% of the working force. But the very top, some of them pay nothing into this program. So my Mustard Seed Act does three things. It names Congress will never touch Social Security again. It names we are removing the Social Security income cap. And then it says capital gains will be treated as regular income in regards to Social Security. These three things, which literally for 99.999% of Dickson County would mean your taxes do not change in any way, shape, or form. Make Social Security solvent for the next 75 to 100 years, and we could actually, instead of having to push the retirement age back to 67 like we have, move it down to 65 like Social Security was when it first started. Mm-hmm. That's not a handout to anyone. That's not entitlement. That's you literally getting what the government promised you. Matt Van Epps is not running on any platform about Social Security. He hasn't said one way or another what he will do with it. The Democratic candidates that I'm running against, Darden Copeland, Vincent Dixie, Solana Holloway, they've all said we should save Social Security. But none of them have said how they plan on doing it. And I'm sitting here just being like, it's pretty simple. We just treat all income as income. We no longer allow the 1%, the people who are getting rich off of the work of the rest of us, to treat us this way anymore. And we elect someone who's willing to stand up and represent us, not them. So that's my Mustard Seed Act. That's the very first bill.
You did a great job of explaining that, by the way. I just truly appreciate you going through it like that and very, very thoroughly. I understand what you're saying.
It's something that, y'all, because I have said so many times in my campaign, this is not about me becoming your congressperson. This is about the things getting done. So by all means, if you're sitting there and saying, I can't vote for a Democrat, I'm not going to vote for Joshua Sales, I'm going to stick with Matt Van Epps. Stick with Matt Van Epps, but by the love of everything on this planet, push him to pass that bill. Because that is something that we all need and deserve. That is all things that we have paid into and have earned. And if you're not doing that, you're literally letting the government walk away with your money. And I'm not for that. I'm for the government doing what we pay them to do. So that's Bill 1.
Well, and I appreciate you coming up with a solution to a problem, right? Because that's really what we're supposed to do, you know. When you decide to run for office, right, you're going to get in there, you got to solve a problem. How? And so the how is so important. And so I appreciate you breaking that down. Tell us about another one.
Yeah. So I'm going to jump all the way to bill number 12, and then we'll kind of jump on some in between. Bill number 12 is one of the more controversial ones because of the mechanic in how it is, how we raise the money for it. So one thing I'll say, every single one of these bills are designed to be self-funded. None of these add to the deficit. In fact, the majority of them actually create a budget surplus. And this last one is specifically doing that. It's what I call the United States Act. It's a wealth tax. And I know there's some people clutching their pearls right now, but give me a second to explain it. Okay. Hopefully I've earned your trust with the Social Security one. Like, this is something I've thought out. In 2023, the RAND Corporation, a nonpartisan corporation, released a study that said from 1975 up to that year, 2023, because of the tax structure in America, because the fact that we cut corporate taxes, because the fact that we lowered the top marginal tax rate, right, under Eisenhower, the man who fought the Nazis and became one of our greatest presidents ever. Do you know what the top marginal tax rate was under him? 91%.
Wow.
Right? So again, like let's be honest, right? This is the 1950s when we said the middle class was growing like never before, when we were seeing America build itself up. Let's be honest with how it was paid. So when I talk about a wealth tax, I'm looking at the fact that from 1975 to 2023, $79.9 trillion, that is trillion with a T, was transferred through the tax system from the bottom 90% Americans to the top 1. During that same time, 1975 to 2023, or more precisely to today, 2026, the national debt went from 500 billion to we're going to hit 40 trillion by the end of this year. And this is something that I found as I looked into this stuff. Who owns that debt? A good portion of it is actually owned in bonds, right? In treasury bonds. The 1% is estimated to hold about 20% of the national debt. So the debt we went into to give them the tax breaks that gave us this debt in the first place, wow, all this money, almost $80 trillion, was transferred from the bottom 90% to the top 1%. And now they get to collect interest on it. I'm not okay with that. Especially as we look at 2010's Citizens United and we look how on Democrats and Republicans, it happens on both sides, y'all. I'm not the person who's going to sit here and tell you that Democrats are clean. We're not. We need to clean our own house as well. But corporate spending in our politics has gotten out of control. And it's not helping the people who own a small business here in Dixon. It's not helping the father who goes and works the graveyard shift at the local plant. It's not helping any of us. It's only helping the top 1%. So when I talk about a wealth tax, what I am truly saying is that we need a representative who is willing to say, this system has not been working. We have only bankrupted our own country. We have only shrunk the middle class. We have only watched as our rural towns shrunk and ate away at themselves. So maybe we try something different. Maybe we go back to that 91%. And y'all, I'm not even proposing that we go back to 91%. What I'm proposing is this: a wealth tax. If you own more than $10 million, everything above that is taxed at 2%. Over $50 million, 4%. Over $100 million, 6%. Over $1 billion, 8%. And when we do that, we raise enough revenue that we can pay off the national debt in 25 to 30 years within our lifetimes, within my lifetime, right? I'm 35, well within my lifetime. We can literally be handing to the next generation a clean slate for the first time in American history since Andrew Jackson.
Wow.
And again, y'all, most of these people who have that much money aren't going to notice 2 to 8% of it gone. If you have $10 million, 2% of that is nothing to you. If you have $1 billion, 8% of that is nothing to you. But this is everything to the working class people. Having a government that is no longer spending 17% of its yearly budget paying off interest, that's major. That means we can lower taxes on the working class and allow every single person listening to this to keep more of their paycheck. That's what I'm concerned about. And there's going to be people out there who call me a leftist, who call me a radical, who call me whatever. But this is what I ask people. I want you to picture your perfect town. What does it take to get us there? If you want to be calling me a radical for getting us there, I don't care. I really don't. Sticks and stones will break your bones, but words will never hurt me.
One of my favorite sayings.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so call me whatever you want. My interest isn't helping my neighbors. So that's the United States Act. ensuring that we end our national debt so no one can ever hold that over us again. And in the meantime, building up the working class. Right? So that was Bill 1, that was Bill 12. Let's talk about one or two more. I am a huge advocate, and this is where the socialism word is going to come out, of universal health care. And the thing I like to talk about when I talk about universal health care is I like to bring up a couple studies. Yale did a study that was published in the peer-reviewed medical journal, The Lancet, in 2020, that named shifting from our private health insurance industry to universal healthcare will save on average 68,000 American lives a year. Individuals who, because they're afraid of that deductible, because they're afraid of that copay, don't go to the doctor. And then they have the heart attack. Or by the time they do actually go to the doctor, the cancer's at stage 4 and there's nothing that can be done about it. Right? 68,000 Americans die every year. And y'all, that was back in 2020. Healthcare costs has only gotten worse since then. There hasn't been a more recent study, but if I was a betting man, I'd be willing to bet that that number has only gone up. 68,000 Americans, that is 22 times the amount of Americans that died on 9/11, and we went to war over that. But yet, we have Congress people who sit back and say, health insurance companies can make billions of dollars a year in profit while you die. I'm not okay with that, right? I think back to my Sunday school teachings. When Jesus resurrected Lazarus, did he look at him and say, now where's your health insurance card? Right? That didn't happen. When we treat each other with compassion and care, we can see so much happen. So let's talk about what universal healthcare does downstream, right? And there's a couple different ways of looking at this. And the other study I want to introduce really quick was one done by the Koch brothers. Are you familiar with the Koch brothers?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. For those of you who are not, the Koch brothers are some of the richest men in our country. They are arguably the ones who bankrolled the Tea Party movement back in 2008. These are individuals who are heavily conservative in every shape, way, and form. They did a study on universal healthcare, and their own study found that universal healthcare would be cheaper than our current system. And it kind of makes sense. When you remove the middleman of insurance needing to make a profit, of course the price is going to go down. Right? Here in America, we spend per capita $15,000 per person on healthcare every year. $15,000. European nations that have some form of universal or government guaranteed healthcare spend on average $8,000. It's about half of what we do. So let's keep that in mind. If we have universal healthcare, rural hospitals don't shut down. And I'm an English teacher, so that was a claim. I'm going to follow it up with evidence and reasoning. Back when Wayne County was still part of Tennessee 7, I actually went down. And Wayne County has the Wayne County Hospital, which has been for years threatened to be shut down. It's only still open because they pivoted from being a overnight care to just an emergency care. If you need overnight services, they send you up to Nashville. And I started questioning, why is this happening, right? There's still the same amount of people here. There's still, healthcare needs to be happening in our rural communities. So why is it shutting down? And what I found was when I started looking into this, the average rural health clinic or hospital cedes anywhere from 30 to 50% of its bills never paid. Because these are individuals that either don't have health insurance, or their health insurance has such a high copay or deductible that they just can't pay it. Well, what happens to that? It goes off to some debt collector. The debt collector collects on it, maybe, because most of the time the person declares bankruptcy. So 30 to 50% of the bills don't get paid. No wonder these places are either shrinking or closing down. They're not getting the revenue that they should be getting. If we have universal health care, though, every bill gets paid because everyone's covered. My universal health care system that I'm proposing, it's named the No One Left Behind Act because it ensures that never again is an American left behind because they can't afford some medical care, right? The fact that, and there's a lot of millennials, people my age who will tell you this, a lot of us are putting off kids. My wife and I are putting off kids because having a kid is so expensive. And not just the diapers and all that, literally the having the birth at the hospital.
Yes.
Is tremendously expensive. I've seen anywhere from $5,000 to $15,000 bills.
I'm familiar with this. Yeah.
A lot of people can't afford that.
Right.
Right? We talk about America has a declining birth rate. Okay, well, let's fix it. It's not because we don't want to have kids. It's that a lot of us just can't afford a kid. And universal healthcare is a fix for that, right? Small businesses. A lot of small businesses either don't provide health insurance or they provide health insurance that has very high deductibles and copays. And they do this because when they buy their health insurance from the health insurance companies, they don't get the same rates as big companies. Big companies, because they have a larger pool of employees, are able to secure lower rates. Small companies can't do that. So they either offer really bad health insurance comparatively, or they offer none. We shift to universal health care. That's no longer an issue because it's no longer up to your employer to offer it. It's guaranteed. Period. Whether you have that job or a different job or you're in between jobs, you have healthcare. And that even brings up another point, which is that 1 in 6 Americans are afraid of quitting their jobs because they're afraid to lose their benefits. Y'all, that's not liberty. That's not freedom. That is being stuck in a job you don't want to be at because you're afraid to lose your healthcare. If healthcare was guaranteed by our government, you actually get more freedom as a worker to decide where you work. You don't have to work for a big company you don't want to. You can work at the smaller company more local to you. You're not afraid to quit a job and be unemployed for 6 months because you're afraid you're going to lose your health insurance in that time. And again, the Koch brothers found that this was cheaper to run overall. And it makes sense when you cut out the profit of the insurance companies, when you have a single-payer healthcare system, there's a reason prescription drugs are cheaper in Canada than they are here, because they have a universal system where they were able to negotiate with the pharmaceutical companies. The laws of capitalism, when we have multiple insurance companies, one might say, hey, I'm only paying $20 for this, but the second the next one says, I'll pay $100, prices go up. If we only have one and they say, hey, we're not paying a penny more than any other citizen on this planet, prices go down. So rural healthcare gets invested into. Small businesses have more leeway and can bring on more workers. And you get guaranteed health care. Having a kid becomes no longer a giant bill. And I haven't even got into the best part. The average family on my healthcare bill would save $10,000 a year. If you save $10,000 a year, that's $10,000 not going into the pocket of some healthcare CEO for him to buy another yacht or to tuck away in the Cayman Islands. That is money staying in your pocket. I don't know about you, but if I had extra $10,000, it's going to go into going out with the friends. It's going to go into buying that car from the local car salesman. It's going to go into buying some new clothes. It's going to go into the local economy.
Kids braces. That's one thing we're paying on right now.
Yeah. But so when it goes into the local economy, right? Dixon itself, Dixon County would see about $60 million in extra revenue bouncing around its local economy. That means those small businesses we just talked about no longer have to worry about, well, I can't hire someone because I can't afford to pay their health insurance. Or if they were paying that health insurance, goes, holy crap, my bottom line just shifted drastically in a good way. But they also have more people coming into their business because people can afford to go into those businesses because they have that extra $10,000 in their pocket. Dixon County has a 2.25% sales tax on top of the state's 7%. That's $5 million of extra sales tax revenue for the county without raising taxes on a single citizen. That is repaved roads. That is investing in your schools. That is maybe a small business office that helps entrepreneurs get up and going. It's whatever your local government wants to do. This is what I call a big government for a small government. Because Dixon County can never fight Wall Street. Dixon County can never go after the billionaire CEOs. But Congress can. And again, I say again, this we had talked about this earlier before the show. Matt Van Epps in January voted to not extend ACA subsidies. And even if you weren't on the ACA plans, the removal of those subsidies on average raised everyone's premiums by 20%. So we have on one side an individual who is doing what is in the best interest of health insurance companies. And then we have me, the only candidate. No other candidate is proposing universal health care, not even the other Democrats, because they don't understand it the way I do. They don't explain it the way that I do. They're afraid to talk about it. I'm not, because to me, it is a home run. It is beneficial in every way, shape, and form. Besides for maybe some healthcare CEO who happens to have property here in Dixon. But you know what? I don't care about that person. I care about everyone else and their well-being. Healthcare used to be, in the 1950s, even adjusted for inflation. Healthcare in the 1950s, adjusted for 2026 inflation, used to cost on average $500 a year. We're paying $15,000. I just want us to return to the America that we used to be, not one that takes advantage of the workers. So again, if you want to call me a socialist for that, I don't care. I challenge you then to tell me why that's a bad thing. Don't just throw out this boogeyman word. Explain to me why it's wrong, because I'm open to the conversation. I'm open to hearing what is wrong with that, because you know what? That means now I know a hole in the boat that I didn't know before, and we can plug it. I'm looking to working together with people to address the issues, not just to say some boogeyman word and run the other way and pretend like there's nothing we can do about it.
You know what I'm the most impressed with right now? And I think this is important that I mention this to the people who are listening, because this is not a video podcast. Joshua came in here today with nothing in his hands. He didn't have a notebook. He's just rattling these numbers off of the top of his head, and I'm very impressed right now that you can remember this much information, and you're getting it right too. Like I'm over here, like you're talking about Social Security, you know how old you used to have to be, you know, tax rates, and you're getting everything right. Mm-hmm. I'm really impressed. It's kind of the Amy Barrett Coney moment where she like turns the paper around, she's got nothing on it. That's kind of you right now. This is all coming straight from your head, which is very impressive to me. It tells me that you've really thought this all the way through and that you really truly understand it, and thank you for bringing it this morning on the show. This is really cool.
And I heavily, you know, I always challenge people, like any number, any statistic I throw out there, look it up yourself. I'm not the person, and this is, you know, my classroom philosophy as well. You are not to take my word just because I say it's my word. If you want to look into it, if you're like, that doesn't sound right to me, please look into it. And please reach out to me and we can have the conversation. If I get something wrong, I'm more than happy to admit I got something wrong. The other thing I want to name is that it was so funny to me. Robertson County did a forum just the other week, and they did a straw poll after it, right? They had Robertson County Democratic Party at the Springfield High School brought together all the Democratic candidates. They had questions for us that we answered, and then they even allowed questions from the audience. And I'm up there doing my thing where, you know, I'm citing studies, I'm listing off statistics, and Darden Copeland at one point, you just see him reach into his pocket and like pull out a paper to like try and keep up. Like, I'm like, I don't need that, man. Like, we can, like, this is how ingrained this stuff is because this is how much I care about this stuff.
I mean, I've seen guys come in here with big notebooks, and there's nothing wrong with that. I want to be very clear. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm just impressed with you have gone, you know, for quite a bit of time here discussing these things and explaining them to me and to the audience, and you don't have a single piece of paper in front of you, and you haven't touched your phone not one time. I mean, that's pretty impressive.
Yeah. And so I do want to, right, the Robertson County afterwards, they did a straw poll. I took 53% of the straw poll. Soletta Holloway, Vincent Dixie each took 6 points. There's a write-in candidate, Lori Bergman. She took 0. And then Darden Copeland took 35. He was considered the front runner going in. I beat him by 18 points. And people were walking up to me afterwards, and they were like, the reason why I walked in voting for Darden, but I changed it to voting for you, is because you not only have a plan, but you're able to explain that plan and you make it seem so easy. And this is something that I've been campaigning for, you know, since February. So, you know, months at this point, 6 months. And so many times I've been on multiple podcasts, I've done multiple interviews, and so many people are like, man, the fact that you're running on 12 bills is impressive to me. And I was like, y'all, maybe this is me telling on myself and how naive I am about this. I thought running on policy was just what you did.
I know, you're making too much sense, brother. You're making too much sense. You better stop now.
Right.
No, you're right, though. You're right. It's supposed to be about policy, right?
Yeah, and so I want to touch on one more bill. And again, you can find all of these bills, the mechanics of them, how we pay for them, because I didn't really get into how you pay for the universal health care. And I won't get too much into it because it literally breaks down into like an accounting table because I use a progressive tax system for it. So yes, technically, yes, y'all, I am talking at that point for universal healthcare, you would see your taxes go up. But I would argue with you that you would save money in the long run because of the savings in healthcare cost. For the median family in Dickson County, the median household in Dickson County makes $85,000. My tax system would cost them $50 a month. That is premium deductible copay. That is doctor visit. That is labs. That is dental, vision, and mental health included. That's all of it. $50 a month. If you can look me in the eye and tell me that you pay less than that, I want to know where you're going. One, because I need to find a new doctor then. But two, like, that just doesn't happen, right? We know this. We know statistically speaking, the average person pays $15,000 a year. And some of that's going to be subsidized by your job. but a lot of that isn't. And so $50 a month for the whole family, mind you, not just you, the whole family. If you're making $85,000 a year, it breaks down to $50 a month, $600 a year. That's cheaper. It is. So yeah, I raised your taxes a little bit, but you're no longer having 5% of your paycheck taken out for health insurance. So let's call that a wash, y'all. This next bill, though, is one that is near and dear to my heart because it's my education bill.
Okay.
And my education bill is the Open Door Act. You can read about this one as well as any of the other 12 bills, again, on my website, salesforcongress.com. Click over to the sales plan because I could not refuse that good pun right there. All of them are listed there. They're broken down into what they are, how they work, how they're funded. My education bill, the Open Door Act, has 3 pillars. The first one is looking at the K through 12 level. We found out earlier this year, it came out, Tennessee has the lowest per student spending in the nation. 51st. And some of you are going to be sitting there saying, don't we only have 50 states? They count DC in this study as its own entity. So 51st in the nation, behind every other state, behind the District of Columbia. We spend the least amount per student. And I see you shaking your head because as a fellow teacher, like we see this in the classroom. I have to buy Costco boxes of snacks for my students. I have to buy supplies for my students. And none of that, well, very little of that is a tax write-off. A billionaire buys a new yacht, according to the big, beautiful bill that passed. All of that's a tax write-off. So education needs to be addressed. And this is something that benefits everyone. Everyone goes through schooling. And if you're going to sit there and say, well, I do private schooling or I do homeschooling, that grocery store clerk that you got mad at because they took too long counting back your change went through public school. The cop who's having to decipher laws before pulling you over or not went to public school. We all interact with public schools, whether we directly do it or indirectly do it, right? So investing in public education to me is always a win. And I even hate to look at it this way, but there is study after study after study that says investing in education has one of the highest returns on investments, bar none, right? So the first pillar of this looks at K through 12 funding, and it looks at schools that spend below the national average on per pupil spending, which again is pretty much all of Tennessee, right? And I'm explaining this to you this way because as a congressman at the federal level, I am setting federal laws, but I am also your congressman for District 7, for Tennessee, for this specific part of Tennessee, for all of Dickson County, and I want you to understand exactly how this benefits you. It creates a program in which the school or the school board literally just has to send off to the federal government, this is our per pupil spending. This is how much it is below the national average. And the federal government says, okay, we're going to make up the difference. We're going to bring you up to the national average because your kids deserve that. This looks like the school that half of it is trailers being able to renovate and be a full school. This looks like the school that has classroom sizes of 40 kids to one teacher, which is illegal, but it does happen. Being able to hire more teachers. This looks like the school that the teachers are leaving for a different county. Y'all, I live in Cheatham, but I work in Davidson because I get paid 20% more. And it's worth the drive to me. I'm sorry, I got bills to pay. it allows that school system to pay their teachers at a more competitive rate. Whatever it is that school needs to do to better itself. Again, this is big government for small government. They get to decide it at that level, but they no longer have to worry about not having enough funding to be at the national average. This is investing in the future of every child in America to guarantee that they have a baseline education. That's pillar one. Pillar two is, and I kind of sandwich this one in the middle because it's the one that is a little harder for people to accept. This one looks at college. There was a point in time in the American college system where public college was really cheap, or in some states even free. My Open Door Act makes every public college in America free. You must maintain a 2.8 GPA. You don't get to go and party on taxpayer dollars. You have to actually go and maintain at least a C plus average, which there's going to be people out there who are like, oh, C plus, it needs to be a B. C is average, right? As a teacher, C is average.
That's what we say, right?
That's what we say. That's what I'm sticking to. And even then, I'm making you do C plus, not C, C plus. So you must maintain a 2.8 GPA. You must be on track to graduate, right? You can't just take random classes and be on this forever. And the reason I say this is studies argue on this part. So I'm going to give you the range. But we know that someone with a college degree makes anywhere from $1.2 to $2.8 million more over their lifetime than a person without a college degree. Right? It makes sense. You have a college degree, you worked for that, you're able to argue for higher pay. You have a college degree, you qualify for higher paying jobs. If you're being taxed 20%, which, let's be honest, you're between sales tax, property tax, income tax, all the taxes, you're taxed at more than 20%. So again, I'm being conservative with these numbers. But if you're taxing $1.2 million at 20%, that's $240,000. Point to me a state public school that costs more than $240,000. We make this money back. And in the meantime, we get to educate Americans. Y'all, you want to talk about the amount of H-1B visa immigrants that are coming to this country and taking high-paying jobs away from Americans? Let's invest in education. Let's actually give people the tools they need to access those jobs, so that we don't have to import people from other countries. We can give Americans good paying jobs. It's a return on investment that comes back time after time after time. Not just from a financial point, but from literacy rates. Half of Americans don't read at a 6th grade level. We are behind in math. We are behind in science. We are behind in all of these things. We are the greatest country in the world when we want to be. And I just want us to be the greatest country in the world. Call me patriotic. But that's what I want, right? So that is what it does, right? It makes public college free. And there are components of this bill which looks at a public college and say, hey, we know there's a lot of bloat in your budget. We know there is. We watched it happen. College tuition rates far outpaced inflation tremendously. UTK in 1991, adjusted for 2026 prices, tuition was $2,000 for the year.
It's interesting.
Now it's $14,000. Okay, that's an increase of 600%. From 1991 to 2026, inflation was not 600%. So we know that there's bloating within that budget. The bill literally mandates audits to remove that so that taxpayers aren't paying for anything they shouldn't be paying for. Okay, I want to be clear. I'm not just throwing money at problems. I want to ensure that we get what we're actually paying for. I just want us to actually be getting some stuff for all the taxes we pay. The last part of this bill, I said there was 3 pillars, and there's one category that I haven't mentioned yet. What is it?
Well, go a couple different directions here.
The trades.
Okay.
Right? I don't believe that every single kid, every single person needs to go to college.
Okay.
But every single person deserves to be given the same investment. So if I'm investing your taxpayer dollars into college graduates, I'm investing money into the trades as well. The last thing that the Open Door Act, the third pillar, is an apprenticeship program. Not a trade school program, an apprenticeship program. One that says, hey, Bobby, plumber here in Dixon, you've been a plumber, you've been licensed, you're bonded, you've been doing this for 30 years. You would love to bring someone on and train them. You just can't afford to. We have a grant system. One that gives you the money to pay for that apprentice's salary so that you can bring them on and you can train the next generation, right? The same type of apprenticeship programs that we used to have in the 1930s and 40s and 50s and 60s that gave us such a solid working class. Invest in them once more. Because I'm not forgetting, right? I'm not the person who's going to sit here and be like, you have to go to college to get a good paying job. I'm a teacher. Do you know the amount of electricians and plumbers that make more money than me?
This is true.
Like, I teach not because it's making me a millionaire. I teach because I enjoy doing it. I love doing it. And there are people who love doing electrical work. There are people who love doing, the real heroes, let's be honest right now, as we're going through another Tennessee summer, are HVAC workers.
Yeah.
Like, I would die without them. I want to make sure that they're invested in just as much as the person who's going for a law degree, the person who's going for an education degree, the person who's going for a business degree. They deserve it. Because no job, I look down on no job. Every job is necessary. If it wasn't, by the laws of capitalism, it wouldn't exist.
True.
So I'm not going to look down on any of them, and I'm not going to forget to invest in any of them. And so that's what this education program does. It brings more into the fold, and it says, let's actually use our federal tax dollars to ensure that every American is getting their fair share at being educated in the field and job that they want to, so that they can work the rest of their life doing the thing they love and contributing to society. And again, this is all stuff that we know when we invest in it, we get a return on that investment. So to me, I love it because, right, we make more in tax revenue because of it, because people have higher paying jobs. And simultaneously, we get to invest in educating people, which is never a bad thing. So that's 4 of the 12 bills, right? At this point, if we went over all of them, we'd be here for the next 3 hours. So I'm not going to take your guys' time with that. They're on my website, Sales for Congress. Click on the sales plan. You can always hit me up. My email address is on there, as well as, you can click over to my social. I'm really active on Facebook and Instagram for my campaign. You can always hit me up there. I am looking to have conversations. I have been so far as I've been campaigning, it's the Democratic primary. So I've been going to a lot of the Democratic the Democratic Party meetings. I'm not afraid for the Dixon Republican Party to say, hey, Josh, you won the primary. We'd love for you to come in and talk with us. not afraid to walk into that building and have those conversations. Now, I'll tell you the same thing I tell anyone else. It has to be a conversation of mutual respect. And the second it no longer becomes that, I'm no longer participating in it. But when we work together with the intention of making things better, it's weird, but they get better. And so I'm not afraid to walk into a room of someone who's sitting on the other side of the aisle as me and having these conversations about, okay, where do you see this not working? Because that's not, not, oh, you beat me, you won. That's okay, cool. Now I know what doesn't work about it, and we can start fixing that. That's the type of leadership we need. Not this fighting back and forth, not this dividing each other. Again, I go back to that quote from my very first interview with the Kingston Springs Gazette. I'm not here to pit left against right. I'm here for the workers. And that is every day of my life.
This has been a great conversation this morning, man. I appreciate it. Joshua Warren Sales is with us, Democrat candidate for Congressional District 7, and that does cover all of Dickson County. So if you're heading to the polls, that you will have this particular office will be on your ballot. I get that question a lot. Who's involved in District 7? That does get a little confusing to folks, but it does consist of all of Dickson County. Let's go ahead and take our last break, come back, we'll wrap it up. This has been great, man. I appreciate you. Like I said, no notes in front of him. He's just knows all this stuff. Very impressive. Joshua Warren Sales is here with us this morning. We'll come back to wrap things up after one last commercial break. You're listening to the Saturday Morning Show here on Dickson. 3, 2, 1. All right, we're back here on the Saturday Morning Show here on Dickson County Radio, and we're in the third segment here, about ready to wrap things up. Joshua Warren Sales is the guest here this morning. He's a Democratic candidate for Congressional District 7, and I've interviewed a lot of people. I have not interviewed anyone who's brought 12 bills ready to talk about them. Now, I know we didn't get a chance to go over all 12 this morning, but you gave us a good sample size here, and of course, we'll go over, contact information if people want you to explain the other ones. I'm sure you'd be glad to do it. I know you want to have those conversations, as you've mentioned this morning. Is there anything that we haven't mentioned this morning specifically that you did want to make sure that you told the voters while you have a chance here?
Yeah, I think the thing I want to talk most about is the political climate in our country right now. I didn't mention it earlier, but I think it's worth noting, and I bring this number up not to scare anyone, but because it is a real number. A study was done just before the 4th of July, just before America's 250th. This was conducted by NPR, and they found in it 37% of Americans named that they thought they agreed with the sentiment that some form of violence was necessary to get us back on track. 37%, that's more than 1 out of 3, that's close to 2 out of 5. And I want to be clear that someone saying they agree with that doesn't necessarily mean that they're saying they're the ones who want to go out and do that violence. But this is a call to everyone on both sides. We need to have more conversations, right? It's not a secret in my family that I'm the Democrat and my father's the Republican. And there's been some conversations over the years where my father will try we can just agree to disagree. And I'm the first to push back on that and say no, because if a father and a son can't have this conversation, who can? And that is what I want to see more of, right? We are seeing a time where Republicans want to own the libs and Democrats want to go after the fascist right. These are your neighbors. Y'all, I grew up in California. I've lived in Tennessee almost more. I'm 35. I moved here when I was 21, so, that's 14 years, 14 versus the 18, but who even remembers the first 4, right? So I've lived in Tennessee almost half of my life. My great aunt was buried in Chattanooga. It makes sense. And any person, any white individual who lives out in California, your family got there from coming through the rest of the country.
Yeah.
We talked earlier about, before the show started, we talked about the Battle of Athens, right? One of my bills, my campaign reform bill, is named after the Battle of Athens. For those of you who aren't in the know, look it up. It is a crazy story, but it's a true story about Athens, Tennessee, and veterans who came home from World War II, saw that their local sheriff was corrupt, and fought back. And they fought back first with the ballot by trying to form a veteran ticket. And when the local sheriff took the ballot boxes and ran them into the jail and was like, we're going to count them in here in private and you guys can just accept the results, they said, that's not how this goes. And they may or may not have, as the story goes, had to use a stick of dynamite to blow a hole in the wall. But not a single person died that day. And they were able to prove that they had won the election. Right? This is actually, for those of you who know your Tennessee history, this is the beginning of the downfall of the Crump political machine running out of Memphis. We should never get to that point in this country. We have people who question election results, even though our own intelligence system says our election systems have never been safer than they are now. We have politicians pushing for the Save America Act because they're telling you, well, we need to make sure all of these illegal immigrants don't vote. I'm sorry, I'm wearing my I voted sticker. You're wearing yours. When you walk in, they ask for a voter ID, a photo ID. There are signs everywhere that says, if you are not a legal citizen, you cannot vote here, and that is a crime, and you will be arrested. The amount of undocumented migrants voting in our elections is practically zero. And again, y'all, any number I cite, I guarantee you can look up yourself. I love our democracy. I think America is the most beautiful country in the world because we are the country that in 1776 said, we are no longer beholden to a king. We are creating a new system, a democratic republic. But let's be honest with our history. In 1776, roughly 6% of the population was eligible to vote. If you weren't a white male that owned land, you were not entitled to vote. That's leaving out any person of color, that is leaving out women, that is leaving out even white men who were in the working class and weren't owners. Over the years, our democracy has expanded time and time again. Whether it is the 19th Amendment giving women the right to vote, whether it is the civil rights movement in which we started to ban poll taxes and literacy tests, we have watched democracy expand, and to me, that is a beautiful thing. That is, we have literally fought wars over this to expand and protect democracy abroad. There's a famous saying, and it's a famous news saying, democracy dies in darkness. When we fail to have these conversations with each other, that is the darkness. When we're too afraid to talk to our neighbor because they have a Trump sign and you voted for Harris, or vice versa, that is the darkness. We are Americans. We are for one another. We are the United States. If Virginia, if North Carolina, if any of these colonies had fought England by itself, they would have lost. We knew we needed each other to stand a chance and to create the democracy that we have. And when Benjamin Franklin was asked, what type of government do we have? Do you remember his response?
A democracy or a republic if we can keep it, right?
A republic if we can keep
I almost
it.
messed it up there.
No, you're good. You're good.
I'm just so listening so intently.
Yeah, I caught you off guard. But y'all, that is what we're still facing today. And I want to be, if you haven't heard it in a while, I want to be the first one in a while to remind you. We are stronger together. 99% of us are the working class. And we have watched over the years as the top 1% has spent more and more and more money to buy our politicians on the left and the right. And it needs to stop. We need to be having conversations. We need more civil discourse. We need to be challenging each other, not fighting each other. I love this country. If I didn't, I wouldn't have volunteered to be in its military and fight for it. And yeah, I was only in for about a year before I was honorably discharged because I tore my ACL. But I went in and I tried to fight for this country. Part of becoming a teacher was because I wanted to help educate the future of this country. And I'm running because I want to protect this country and I want to protect the people of it. Because what is this country but not the people of it? And when we have 68,000 Americans dying every year because they can't afford health care, when we have education rates dropping behind other countries because we're not investing in it, when we have our Social Security being threatened because we've allowed the richest in this country not to pay their fair share into it, when we've allowed our national debt to balloon to $40 trillion because we refuse to balance our budget. Y'all, if you see my yard sign, it says tax the 1%, balance the budget, help the working class. Those are my 3 pillars. And I only want to tax the 1% if we lived in a country where the tax rate was what it was, but we had the best education and we had the best healthcare system and we had the best everything else. I wouldn't be sitting here saying we needed to change our tax system. But if we're being honest, we don't have those things. And when we talk about making America great again, so many people harken back to the 1950s and 60s. So, okay, let's be honest. In the 1950s and the 1960s, our tax rate for the corporate businesses in this country was double what it was today. Our personal income at the federal level was double what it was today. We allowed the experiment of trickle-down economics. That's been going on since the mid-70s. Y'all, it's about time that we're just being honest and we say that hasn't worked 100% of the time. I'm being very careful with my wording there. I'm leaving room open for maybe it works in certain specific places, right? Because if you tax someone 100% of their income, they're never going to work, right? That's fair to say. But our current system isn't working. And I think we owe it to each other to just sit down and talk about why and what we can do to fix that. And we're not getting that with a lot of our politicians today. I would argue it's because a lot of them are bought out by corporate interest, and it's easier for them to pit the left against the right so that we're not focused on the fact that we're all losing. But that's all the more reason that I sit here today and have this conversation, because we deserve better. And I've been the first. I have said it so many times in my campaign. This is not about me winning. This is not about Joshua Warren Sales becoming your congressperson. This is about the things getting done. So come August 6th, at the end of the Democratic primary, should another Democrat win, push them to adopt these ideas. Come November 3rd, should Matt Van Epps win over the Democrat, push him to adopt these ideas. I don't care if it's a Democrat or a Republican sitting in DC representing us. I care about the results. George Washington, our very first president, when he left office in his farewell address, warned us that the party system would destroy this country. And we're watching it happen. We can either be honest with that and put a pause on it and do better, or we can watch this country grow closer and closer and closer to choosing violence once more. 37% of Americans agree with the sentiment that some form of violence is necessary to get us back on track. That has grown since they started asking this question a decade ago. I want a government where that becomes zero.
I'm glad you brought up the Washington story, because I teach, world history, honors world history, and it's more of an American history thing, but it does come up from time to time, Washington and his farewell address. And I always say, he warned us not to get involved with political parties. And they always say, well, why didn't we listen? And I always say, that's the $1 million question. Why didn't we listen? Because it's ingrained in our politics now. I don't know if we'll ever get rid of it. But at one point, we didn't have to go in that direction. And the founding father, one of the founding fathers, the first president of the United States, who walked away, when he didn't have to, told us, don't do this. This is a bad idea. He set the precedent for walking away after 8 years, which I've always loved.
Yeah.
In all levels of government, by the way. I think 8 years is about as far as anybody needs to go these days. But I've always just found that whole thing fascinating with Washington. So I'm glad you brought that up. As a history teacher, you brought up several history lessons today.
I figured you would enjoy them. And, as an English teacher, I tell people, you really can't teach English or appreciate English, the actual literature and rhetoric of it, without knowing the history that was involved with
They go together quite a bit. Me and me and the English teachers work very closely together and supplement one another, I would think. I think because people don't realize how much those go hand in hand. We do a lot of writing in history as well too these days. So,
and I've argued that English in high school should actually start with early American English and go up to contemporary from freshman to senior year, so that you actually see the evolution of it. I've never had an administrator who's yes, let's do that. They all go with their own thing.
I like it.
I think it's a good idea, but I'm just the English teacher at this point.
Us teachers who have been teaching the content for 10, 15 years, we're not the best people to ask about this, right?
Why would you talk to us about it?
Anyways, thank you, Joshua Warren Sales, this morning for coming in. Again, he is a Democratic candidate, Congressional District 7. Early voting is open now. Actually opened yesterday, and I'm going to see if I can find the exact schedule for Dickson County here, but I can say this with confidence, that it began on the 17th, and it will end on Saturday the 1st, August the 1st. So you've got from today until August the 1st, and I found it. How about
So you have essentially the next 2 weeks. That excludes Sundays. Depending on your polling location, the hours do vary. You can always look it up on govotn.com. But Justin has the specifics here.
Yeah, I actually went by the election office, what was it, Thursday, the day before early voting began, because I just wanted to make sure we had the right information. I don't want to, I know a lot of people, we've built this thing up. We've got a lot of followers now. I'm very proud of that. But also with that amount of following comes some sort of responsibility to make sure that you get things right. So I did go over and talk to Ms. Littleton, who's our election coordinator out in Charlotte. And so early voting, there's only 2 locations for early voting. If you want to early vote in Dickson County, you can go to Charlotte, which is over there by the schools. There's a little house there, the Election Commission office. You can look it up. It'll give you the address. I've got it here, actually. It's 110 Academy Street there in the downtown Charlotte area, I guess you could say, right off the square, right by the schools, right off the three-way stop by the schools. If you're from here, you know exactly what I'm talking about. The other place that you can vote is in Dixon at the Public Library, 303 Hensley Drive. If you're not sure where the public library is, because some people do say, I don't know where that is. I say it's the Food Line building. And then they go, oh, yeah, gotcha. If you've been around here for a long time. So those are the two places that you can early vote. You cannot early vote at your normal polling location. On election day, you will only be able to go to your polling location. So big difference there. Just want to make sure I went over that. Now, here's the schedule. And he mentioned Sunday is a no-go. We do not vote on Sundays. The offices are closed. However, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday, 8:30 to 3:30 p.m. And then Thursday is a little bit different schedule for folks, I think, who maybe work a little bit later because they're going from 10 to 6. So Thursday is the late day. The only day of the week that they are open after 3:30 is Thursday. Okay, typically that's been the day that I usually go when school's in session because I can't go during the day. That's usually the day I look for. And then Saturday is also available, so 8 a.m. to 11 a.m. And so this is airing on Saturday. So you guys got until 11. So. Which is probably about the time this airs. So maybe a little too late. You'll have to wait till Monday morning. But that's the schedule. Please, we want to encourage everybody to early vote. You know, when you look at, you've thrown out a lot of statistics today, and you may know these statistics. I don't know. But Tennessee, as a state, we don't show up to vote the most, right? We're pretty low down on the list. I don't know if you know the number. But it's not, when you look at it compared to other states, it's not flattering. It's like, man, Tennessee, we're really good at a lot of things. But going out to vote, it's not necessarily one of them. And we haven't had the turnout, I think, that we would really like to see. So just want to try to encourage everybody to vote, right?
Absolutely. I think a lot of people, there's been so many people as I've campaigned that have said, like, well, I just don't vote anymore because nothing changes. And, nothing changes if you do nothing, right? So it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah.
It is up to you as the people to push your representative to represent you in the best way possible. And the number one way you can do that is by showing up to the polls and voting accordingly. Absolutely.
Now, I want to give you one more chance before we close out here to give out your contact information. Maybe somebody wants you to explain the bill because you do such a really good job at it. So if you're out there listening and you really like the bills that he's put forth, give him a call and ask him because he's a teacher and we have a way of explaining things that are kind of unique. So what's your contact information for anybody who might be interested?
Yeah. So always I start with my website, salesforcongress.com, SALES, the number 4 congress.com. You can also find me on Facebook or Instagram. I'm really responsive on the messengers on those. You can follow the link from my website to those, or you can literally just look up Joshua Sales for Congress on either one. It should pop right up. You can also email me directly at jws4cd7 at gmail.com. That is jws4cd7 at gmail.com.
Awesome. Thank you again for coming in today, and thank you for coming so prepared and ready to go. And I didn't have to pull any questions out of you. You were very thorough. I appreciate that as an interviewer. That's always a fun Saturday morning when somebody shows up just ready to go. So thank you so much for that. And hey, come back sometime. I'd like to do this again with you.
Thank you, Justin. I'd love to be back on again.
Awesome. All right. Well, early voting is underway. You guys make sure that you get out and early vote. We've got the schedules posted on the Dickson County Radio page and the DCTV page. If you didn't get a chance to write that down, check out our Facebook pages, and we've got all that information for you. Appreciate everybody listening this morning, and we're looking forward to another great episode next week. We've got a couple more guests lined up. So until then, Dickson County, have a great weekend.